I am 38 years old and married to my wife, who is 33. We got married 2 years ago after dating for 3 years. At the time, she seemed more eager to get married than I was, so I agreed to it mainly to make her happy. We started trying to have a baby again about a year ago, but it was really difficult. My stress grew so much that I decided to get tested. During this tough time, my wife's attitude changed, and I struggled to cope with her behavior. Just a few days after my test, the doctors told me I was sterile. Hearing that was devastating for me. I had already pictured myself as a father and really wanted to have children, even if it wasn't my idea to start a family. The worst part was yet to come. I felt scared to tell my wife about my infertility, worrying about how she would react. I couldn't handle the thought that our relationship might never lead to what she wanted, especially since she had been harsh towards me. So I held off on sharing my test results for a few days. Then, she surprised me. 4 days after I found out I was sterile, she said she had important news: she was pregnant. This shocked me, especially since she was unaware of my situation. She celebrated, and I tried to be happy for her to avoid raising any questions. The next day, I had another test to confirm I was really sterile, and the results were the same. I was confused because if I wasn't the father, it meant she had to have an affair. She couldn't have done anything without asking me for money first, since I was the only one working, so it seemed clear she had been unfaithful. To announce her pregnancy, she planned a big celebration. For the next 3 days, I kept my feelings hidden while she was so excited. I felt heartbroken, but I needed to find out the truth. I didn't tell my family because it felt too personal to share. I really wanted to know who the father of her baby was, but I held back, fearing she might walk away if I confronted her. Thankfully, I discovered the truth on the day of the party. Many people came, including coworkers, friends, and family. One neighbor, a 27-year-old model who was definitely more attractive than I am, was also invited. He moved in with his aunt to be closer to his modeling career. My wife used to cook for him. She seemed to have a soft spot for him, and he even dined at our home a few times. During those dinners, we talked about his work. They had a lot in common and instantly connected when they first met. He was smart, well-read, and studying literature, just like my wife. Since he seemed like a nice guy, I never felt any hostility towards him, and I trusted my wife. However, I noticed a difference during our celebration. When he walked in, my wife's face lit up. She rushed to him, and they hugged longer than she did with any of the other guests. I noticed this, even if others didn't, and I felt something was off. I needed to find out more, so I decided to step away for a bit. Instead of going to the living room, I went to the bedroom and looked at my wife's laptop. A few days later, when she told me she was pregnant, I got a chance to check her phone while she was asleep. I didn't find anything unusual, but she often watched or typed on her laptop when I was home, making it harder to see what she was doing. She would turn the screen away when I asked, saying she was working on her manuscript, and I respected her privacy, believing she was really writing a book. But now things felt different, and I suspected there was no book. I thought she was just covering up what was really on her laptop. Fortunately, I found another email address while looking into it. I switched to that one and read through all the sent and received emails, which were filled with love notes between my neighbor and my wife. He used his real name, so I had his email address. In the latest emails, she told him she was pregnant. He seemed upset and wanted to end things, but my wife wouldn't let him go. Then I saw the worst she told him she will lawyer file for divorce. She even tried to convince me to have a baby so she could get child support and alimony after the divorce, planning to move in with our neighbor and have a happy life. Reading that made me sick, and the thought still turns my stomach. I pushed my feelings aside, focused on work, and took screenshots of the email on my phone before putting it back where I found it. My wife's actions made me feel more disgusted than the cheating itself. It was bad enough that she was unfaithful, but the idea that she wanted me to have a child just to get money for her new life with him was outrageous. To top it off, I had no idea she was such a good actress, and her joy about everything was unsettling. I was furious and decided I needed to get back at her. I planned to go along with her scheme and give her a surprise she wouldn't see coming. There was no way I was going to let her off the hook for her lies and betrayal. I couldn't let her get away with this. For 9 months, I acted like the perfect father and husband, even though it was hard to accept that she had been lying to me the whole time. The more she pretended to be happy with me, the more determined I was to keep up the act. I made sure she took her vitamins and went to every doctor appointment. A few days ago, when my wife went into labor, I was really nervous, but I pushed those feelings aside and drove her to the hospital by myself. I had called my parents but didn't want them there in case things got too intense. Since her parents had a long drive, we had some time alone. That's when I chose to tell her the truth. I said I would step outside to let our neighbor know to come once she was settled in the room. She looked surprised and said she didn't want a stranger there during the birth. I smiled and showed her the results of my fertility test and the divorce papers I had filed a few days before her due date. I had made sure to bring them with me. She looked confused as I explained that the baby wasn't mine since I couldn't have gotten her pregnant, even if I had wanted to. Then, I told her about the emails I had found in her private account. That was when it hit her what was really happening, and she struggled to find words. When I walked out of the hospital and called our neighbor to say my wife was in labor, my heart raced, and I hung up quickly without waiting for a response. I got in my car and waited for her family. As soon as I heard her dad's car pull into the driveway, I left. I drove to a motel outside of town and turned off my phone to stay safe. To make sure I had everything I needed, I had packed my bags weeks earlier and stored them in my trunk. I tried to keep myself busy that day with beer, TV, and other distractions, finally feeling free from the whole charade. That night, I slept well. The next morning, I powered up my phone, and my neighbor and wife had sent me tons of messages, but I didn't read them all. I saw some texts from my brother and dad, so I figured my wife called them when she couldn't reach me. I decided to call my parents to explain what was going on, telling them I'd be home soon and ask them to bring my brother if possible. When I arrived at my parents' house, my brother was there, and they all looked confused and a bit upset, which was understandable since they had just seen the birth of their grandson, while I missed my own child being born. I sat them down and shared the whole story along with why I did what I did. They were completely speechless when I finished explaining my situation. I expected a flood of questions and accusations, but nothing came. My dad only said he hoped nothing worse would happen, and the others stayed quiet. So that was it. This was a few days ago, and while my family hasn't said much, my wife has been vocal about how I ruined her first experience as a mother. Since I left, she has tried to reach me through calls and texts, but I haven't replied. A few hours ago, my neighbor texted me, saying my wife was very upset and that we should try to work things out. I'm surprised at how many people are reaching out to me, making it seem like I'm overreacting. My neighbor also mentioned that my wife's pregnancy had rekindled her feelings for me, which was shocking to them both, and suggested I should try to save our marriage. I called nonsense on that, questioning why my neighbor was still involved if she really loved me again. I don't understand why people think I'm so naive. I can't handle my wife's anger. She believes that, despite knowing the truth, I chose to stick around and put up with everything. She says I deceived her by staying when I knew she was unfaithful and not carrying my child. It has been over a week since the baby's birth, and I'm still in a hotel. I haven't seen my wife and don't plan to. I made it clear I'm not interested in talking to her, so I don't understand why she keeps reaching out. I haven't blocked her yet, but I did block my neighbor, who reminded me that my wife is still hoping to hear from me. I'm convinced his concern is really about making sure she gets part of the alimony and divorce settlement. My wife was a stay-at-home parent, which I respected, but her being unfaithful while not working was unacceptable. To be clear, I never pushed her to quit her job after we married. In fact, I supported her when she was working. It was her choice to stay home, and I respected that because I had a good job. I believe my lawyer can help me avoid paying alimony by proving her infidelity, which should be straightforward. My neighbor struggles to find good modeling jobs, so juggling his expenses, my wife's bills, and a child will be tough for them, even combined. I'm just glad to be out of this situation and won't be giving them anything, not even my time. I hope my wife realizes this and stops trying to delay the divorce, given her lack of understanding. I'm ready for the chance that she won't be on board. I'm not too worried though, because I still have the pictures of the emails sent and received from her private email on my phone, and they're backed up on my laptop. Even if she decides to delete her account, she can't get rid of the photos I have. If it comes down to it, I'll pay her alimony. At least that means I won't have to be around her. Since our place is in my name, she should feel lucky I haven't kicked her out yet. For now, I hope this situation clears up quickly. Update: I was right. My wife is making poor choices. She wanted to negotiate more after I already offered her a fair settlement, which was just the total amount she spent during our marriage. I don't know what else she's expecting. When she texted me yesterday saying she left the house, I thought she moved back in with her parents. I was disappointed to find out she moved into our neighbor's house. That means I'll still see her and her new boyfriend every day. I considered getting a hotel but decided against it because this is my home, and I won't let them push me out. Living with our neighbor could hurt my divorce case, and she's only making things harder for herself. I did wonder why she didn't move in with her parents, but then I found a message from her dad buried in my text. He apologized for her actions and made it clear he disapproves. I almost cried because his support meant a lot to me. He said he'd cut ties with her since she's fighting the divorce. I don't get why she's acting this way. It's going to backfire on her. She has some nasty tricks. Maybe she's just not thinking, which I hope isn't the case. They might try to make me uncomfortable with their living situation, but I refuse to let it bother me. I'm saving money by staying in my own home instead of a hotel. My wife is struggling with the divorce settlement talks, which have been dragging on for a month now. I have proof that she cheated. Update 3: My wife is really struggling with the divorce settlement talks that started a month ago. I have no doubt about what I accused her of. I can show that she was unfaithful, especially since she moved in with the guy I suspected she cheated with. She tried to make up a story that I was sterile because I drink too much, and that's why she had an affair. I felt a lot of anger towards her during our struggle with infertility, but that didn't matter because everyone knew I had stopped drinking when we started trying for a baby last year and hadn't had a drop since. I don't understand why she thought her approach would work, especially since her first plan had failed badly. Now she was too focused on being the mom to think clearly. She seemed desperate, holding on to anything, probably because she was overwhelmed and her partner wasn't the brightest. She likely realized she wouldn't get much, if any, support from him, especially since she got kicked out of his house a few days ago with her baby. I witnessed the whole scene from my living room after hearing a lot of yelling. I saw my wife and her son being thrown out while he shouted terrible things at her. Despite our past issues, I rushed to help as soon as I saw him pushing her out while she was holding the newborn. That innocent baby shouldn't have to suffer for something that wasn't his fault. When I reached them, my wife and her baby were crying, and he had already slammed the door. I took the baby and held my wife's hand to lead them back to my house. I called my father-in-law to come get them, and he arrived quickly to take her away, thanking me for my help. My wife cried the whole time, so I comforted both her and the baby. She convinced me not to call the police because she didn't want to deal with more trouble, even though I thought about it. She kept apologizing for everything and said she lost all self-respect trying to be with the man she loved. She told me she would accept whatever happened and wouldn't negotiate anymore. I guess that's a good sign. I hope she chooses to report him and finds a way to heal. I don't regret anything because I did my best to be there for them.